Welcome to True Crime and Coke. I am your host, Eve, and this podcast is about true crime, disappearances, conspiracies, hauntings, and anything strange or unusual, all while drinking an excessive amount of Diet Coke. If you have a story to share, I would love to hear and feature it on a future episode. Just email me at truecrimeandcoke@gmail.com and put which category it is in the subject line. If you enjoy this podcast and want it to continue, please rate me 5 stars, tell your friends about me, and consider supporting me on Patreon under True Crime and Coke. Now that that's out of the way, let's begin. Robert Black was born April 21st, 1947. He was a Scottish serial killer and pedophile who was convicted of the kidnap, rape, sexual assault, and murder of 4 girls aged between 5 and 11 in a series of killings committed between 1981 and 1986 in the United Kingdom. Black was convicted of the kidnapping, rape, and murder of 3 girls on May 19, 1994. He was also convicted of the kidnapping of a 4th girl and had earlier been convicted of the kidnapping and sexual assault of a 5th. He was sentenced to life imprisonment with a recommendation that he serve a minimum of 35 years. Black was further convicted of the 1981 sexual assault and murder of 9-year-old Jennifer Carty in 2011, and at the time of his death was regarded as the prime suspect in the 1978 disappearance and murder of 13-year-old Janet Tate. Black may also have been responsible for several other unsolved child murders throughout Britain, Ireland, and continental Europe between 1969 and 1987. The nationwide manhunt for Black was one of the most exhaustive UK murder investigations of the 20th century. He died of a heart attack in 2016 at age 68. Let's start at the beginning. Robert Black was born in Grangemouth, Stirlingshire on April 21st, 1947. He was the illegitimate child of Jesse Hunter Black and an unknown father. His mother originally planned to have him adopted before she immigrated to Australia to escape the stigma of his birth. He was not adopted, and at 6 months old was placed with an experienced middle-aged foster couple in Kinlochleven named Tulip. He adopted their surname. Black showed antisocial tendencies and became known as an aggressive child with few friends. He was prone to tantrums and vandalized school property. He was also a target for bullying among children his own age and became a bully towards younger children. Though his foster mother insisted upon his cleanliness, he cared little for his own hygiene and was called Smelly Bobby Tulip by his classmates. At the age of 5, Black and a girl the same age compared their genitalia, this triggering a childhood belief within Black that he should have been born female, and he developed a deep interest in his genitalia, the genitals of female children and body orifices. From the age of 8, he would regularly insert objects in his own anus, which was a practice he carried into adulthood. Locals later recalled seeing bruises on Black's face and limbs, suggesting he had been physically abused by his foster parents. Black stated he could not recollect their origin and that they may have resulted from childhood fights. Despite being adamant that he could not recall the origin of these bruises, Black was a chronic bedwetter and freely admitted to being berated and beaten by his foster mother for each offense. By 1958, the Tulips had both died, and he was placed with another foster family in Kinlochleven. He soon committed his first known sexual assault, dragging a young girl into a public bathroom and fondling her. His foster mother reported the offense and insisted he be removed from their home. Black was placed in a mixed-sex children's home on the outskirts of Falkirk. Here he regularly exposed himself to girls, and on one occasion he forcibly removed the underwear of a girl. As a result, he was sent to Red House Care Home, a high-discipline, all-male establishment in Musselburgh. At this new location, Black was sexually abused by a male staff member for 3 years, typically by being forced to perform fellatio. In 1963, Black left the Red House Care Home. With assistance from child welfare agencies, he moved into another boys' home in Greenock and obtained a job as a butcher's delivery boy. So he was about 13 years old at that time. He later said that he had fondled 30 to 40 young girls while making deliveries if, when he showed up to their house, he noticed that the girls were alone. However, none of these incidents were reported. On a summer evening in 1963, Black encountered a 7-year-old girl playing alone in a park. He lured the child to a deserted air raid shelter on the pretext of showing her some kittens. There, he held the girl by the throat until she lost consciousness, then masturbated over her body. The following day, Black was arrested and charged with lewd behavior. A psychiatric examination suggested the incident was an isolated one and that Black was not in need of treatment, and as a result was given a very, very light sentence. Shortly after, Black moved to Grangemouth, where he lodged with an elderly couple and worked for a builder's supply company. He began dating a young woman he met at a local youth club. This was his only known girlfriend, and they dated for several months. According to Black, he had asked this woman to marry him and was devastated when she ended the relationship, but she ended it in part due to his unusual sexual demands. In 1966, Black's landlords discovered he had molested their 9-year-old granddaughter whenever she visited their household. They evicted him but did not inform police, wanting to spare their granddaughter further trauma. Black lost his job soon after, and he returned to Kinlochleven, where he lodged with a married couple who had a 6-year-old daughter. Within a year, Black's new landlords informed police that he had repeatedly molested their daughter. He pleaded guilty to 3 counts of indecent assault against a child. He was sentenced to a year at Polmont Borstal in Brighton, which specialized in training and rehabilitation of serious youthful offenders. Although he later spoke freely about every aspect of his youth and adolescence, including the sexual abuse he had suffered at the Red House care home, he refused to discuss Polmont Borstal beyond saying that he had vowed to never again be imprisoned. This had led to speculation that he may have been brutalized there as well. In September 1968, 6 months after his release from Polmont Borstal, Black moved to London, where he initially found lodgings close to King's Cross Station. Between 1968 and 1970, he supported himself through various, often casual jobs. One of these was as a lifeguard at a Hornsey swimming pool, where he was soon fired for fondling a girl. No charges were brought. Through a contact he had met at a King's Crossing bookshop, Black began to collect child pornography. Initially, much of this material was in a magazine and photograph format, although he later expanded this material to include videos depicting graphic sexual child abuse. As Black was a keen photographer, he sometimes also photographed children, mostly girls between 8 and 12, and he would photograph them discreetly at locations such as swimming pools. He stored these images alongside his pornographic material in locked suitcases. Black frequented the Three Crowns, a Stamford Hill pub where he became known as a proficient darts player. There he also met a Scottish couple, Edward and Kathy Rayson. In 1972, he moved into their attic. The Raysons considered Black a responsible, if somewhat reclusive, tenant who gave them no cause for complaint beyond his poor hygiene. They did suspect Black of viewing pornographic material, but had no idea that it was pedophilic. Black remained their lodger until his arrest in 1990. To increase his scope for casual work, in the mid-1970s, Black bought a white Fiat van to enable him to commit to driving for a living. In 1976, Black obtained a permit job as a van driver for Poster Dispatch and Storage Ltd., a Hoxton-based firm whose fleet delivered posters typically depicting pop stars and billboard advertisements to locations across the UK, Ireland, and continental Europe. To his employers, Black was a conscientious employee who was willing to undertake the long-distance deliveries some of his married coworkers did not like to do. While working as a driver, Black developed a thorough knowledge of much of the UK road network, subsequently enabling him to snatch children across the entire country and dispose of their bodies hundreds of miles from the site of their abduction. To reduce the chance of being identified by eyewitnesses, Black often adjusted his appearance by alternately growing a beard or appearing clean-shaven, and occasionally shaved his head completely bald. Black also owned over a dozen pair of glasses and would wear a pair significantly different from those he regularly wore when abducting children. He also covered the rear windows of his van with opaque black curtains. The first murder Black is proven to have committed was that of 9-year-old Jennifer Carty, who was abducted, sexually assaulted, and murdered on August 12, 1981. Carty was last seen by her mother at 1:40 p.m. as she cycled to a friend's house in Ballandary County, Antrim, but she never arrived. Hours later, Carty's bicycle was discovered less than a mile from her home, covered with branches and leaves. The stand of the bicycle was down, suggesting that she had stopped her bicycle to converse with her abductor. A search aided by 200 volunteers found nothing further. 6 days later, 2 anglers discovered Carty's body in a reservoir near a lay-by in Hillsborough, 16 miles from her home. The pathologist noted signs of sexual abuse on Carty's body and underwear. The autopsy concluded she had died of drowning, most likely accompanied by ligature strangulation. The watch she had been wearing had stopped at 5:40 p.m. The location of the body near a major arterial road between Belfast and Dublin led police to suspect her murderer had been familiar with the area. The reservoir in which her body was found was near a route frequented by long-distance delivery drivers and visibly only yards away from the lay-by, suggesting that the killer may have traveled extensively upon this route. Black's second confirmed victim was 11-year-old Susan Clare Maxwell, who lived on Cornhill-on-Tweed on the English side of the Anglo-Scottish border. Maxwell was abducted on July 30th, 1982, as she walked home from playing tennis in Coldstream. She was last seen alive at 4:30 p.m. crossing the bridge over the River Tweed and was likely abducted by Black shortly after. The following day, a search was mounted. Search dogs were used, and at peak, 300 officers were assigned full-time. A thorough search was made of every property in both Cornhill and Coldstream and over 80 square miles of terrain. Several people reported having seen a white van in the locality. One said a van had been parked in a field gateway off of the A697. I guess that's probably like a highway. On August 12th, Maxwell's body was found by a lorry driver. Her body was covered with undergrowth, and she was clothed except for her shoes and underwear. The precise date and cause of her death could not be determined due to decomposition. Maxwell had been bound and gagged with sticking plaster, and her underwear had been removed and folded beneath her head, suggesting that she had been sexually assaulted. A coroner's inquest concluded Maxwell had died shortly after being abducted. Evidently, Maxwell remained in Black's van, alive or dead, for over 24 hours as his delivery schedule encompassed Edinburgh, Dundee, and finally Glasgow, where he made his final delivery close to midnight on July 30th. The following day, Black returned from Glasgow to London, discarding the body beside the A518 road near Uttoxeter, 264 miles from where Maxwell had been abducted. 5-year-old Caroline Hogg, Black's youngest known victim, disappeared while playing outside her Beach Lane home in Edinburgh, suburb of Portobello, on the early evening of July 8, 1983. When she failed to return home by 7:15 p.m., her family searched the surrounding streets. A boy told them he had seen Caroline with a man on the nearby promenade, which they searched before calling the police. The ensuing search was the largest in Scottish history at the time, with 2,000 local volunteers and 50 members of the Royal Scots searching the first Portobello, then expanding their scope to all of Edinburgh. By July 10th, Hogg's disappearance was headline news across the UK. 9 known pedophiles were identified as having been in Portobello on July 8th. All were eliminated, though, from being suspects. Numerous witnesses had seen an unkempt, balding, furtive-looking man wearing horn-rimmed glasses, watching Hogg as she played, then following her to a nearby fairground. A 14-year-old girl named Jennifer Booth had seen Hogg sitting with this man on a bench. Booth overheard Hogg reply, "Yes, please," to some question posed to her by the man before the two walked to the fairground holding hands. There, the man paid for Caroline to ride a carousel as he watched. A witness stated to police that as they left, Caroline seemed frightened. Hogg remained in Black's van for at least 24 hours. Black delivered posters to Glasgow several hours after the abduction and refueled his van in Carlisle early in the following morning. On July 18th, Hogg's naked body was found in a ditch close to the M1 motorway in Twycross, 310 miles from where she had been abducted and just 24 miles from where Maxwell's body had been found the previous year. The precise cause of death could not be determined due to the extent of decomposition. Insect activity suggested the body had been placed where it was found on or after July 12th. Black had made a delivery to Bedworth on that date. The absence of clothing again suggested a sexual motive. The following March, a televised reconstruction of the abduction was broadcasted nationally. Appealing for witnesses to come forward, Hogg's father said, "You think it can never happen to you, but it has proven time and time again that it can, and it could again if this man isn't caught in the near future." Following the discovery of Caroline Hogg's body, police in Scotland and England concluded that Caroline had been murdered by the same man who had killed Susan Maxwell. By early 1987, all information regarding the murders had been inserted into the Revolutionary Holmes Information Technology System. Sadly, all the police forces in the UK did not stop Robert Black from murdering again. On Wednesday, March 26, 1986, Sarah Harper, age 10, went to K&M stores to buy a loaf of bread and some potato chips. The owner later told the police that Sarah had left the shop at 7:55 p.m. When Sarah failed to return home that night, her family focused on a yard located at the Miles Spencer store. Why? Because Sarah and her sister Claire used to play there. Black also made deliveries to that same Miles Spencer store. Sarah's body was found floating in the River Trent near Nottingham on April 19, 1986. An autopsy discovered that Sarah had died 5 to 8 hours after her abduction. The official cause of death was drowning. The autopsy also found that Sarah had been thrown into the river while still alive. On April 23, 1988, an attempted abduction of a teenage girl occurred in the Nottingham district of Radford, which was not initially deemed by Nottinghamshire police to be linked to the 3 child killings. The victim of this attempted abduction was Teresa Thornhill, a 15-year-old who was 4 feet 11 inches tall, which may have led Black to think that she was younger than she was. That evening, Thornhill had been at a social gathering in a local park with her boyfriend, Andrew Beeston, and other teenagers before walking home with Beeston. The pair had parted company at the end of Norton Street when Thornhill noted a blue transit van slowly coming to a stop ahead of her. The driver of this van got out and raised the van's hood and asked Thornhill, "Can you fix engines?" When Thornhill replied that she could not and began walking at a much brisker pace, Black clasped his arms across her mouth and navel and attempted to drag her into his vehicle. Thornhill resisted him. She kicked as she attempted to free herself from what she later described as his bear hug, grasping of her body. As her would-be abductor wrestled her to his van, Thornhill squeezed his testicles, causing him to loosen his grip sufficiently enough for her to bite into his right forearm. Black shouted, "Oh, you bitch," as Thornhill began to scream for her mother, wedging her feet on each side of the door frames as she struggled to resist being forced into the van. At the same time, Beeston ran towards the van, shouting, "Let her go, you fat bastard." Upon hearing this, Black loosened his grip on Thornhill, who fell on the road sobbing. Black himself ran towards the driver's seat of his van and rapidly drove away from the scene. Both Thornhill and Beeston ran to Thornhill's home and informed her parents what had occurred. They immediately reported the attempted abduction to Nottinghamshire police, who questioned both youngsters. Both Thornhill and Beeston described her would-be abductor as an unkempt, overweight, balding, and heavily built man, aged between 40 and 50 and about 5 feet 7 inches in height. Black was arrested in Stowe on July 14, 1990. David Herx, a 53-year-old retired postmaster, was mowing his front garden when he saw a blue transit van slow to a standstill across the road. The man got out of the van and appeared to be cleaning his windshield, while at the same time he also noticed his 6-year-old neighbor coming into the scene. Herx then stooped to clear cuttings from his lawnmower, and while he did this, he saw the girl's feet lifting from the pavement. So he straightened himself to observe the vehicle's driver hastily pushing something through the passenger door before clambering across to the driver's seat, closing the passenger door, and starting the engine. Realizing he had witnessed an abduction, Herkes noted the license plate number of the van as it sped away. He went to his neighbor's home where the girl's mother called the police. Within minutes, 6 police vehicles had arrived in the village. As Herkes described the van to officers, he observed it driving in their direction and exclaimed, "That's him! That's the same van!" An officer jumped in the van's path, forcing it to halt. Police removed the driver from his seat and handcuffed him. And this is a weird part. One of the officers on the scene was actually the abducted girl's father, and he was the one who opened the rear of the van and went inside calling his daughter's name. He saw movement in a sleeping bag and untied it to discover his daughter inside. She was bound with her wrists behind her back and her legs tied together. Her mouth was bound and gagged with sticking plaster, and a hood was tied over her head. En route to Selkirk Police Station, Black said, "It was a rush of blood to the head. I have always liked little girls since I was a little lad. I tied her up because I wanted to keep her until I had dropped a parcel off. I was going to let her go," Black claimed. He had interfered with his victim only a little. A doctor found that the victim had been subjected to a serious sexual assault. The girl was able to pinpoint the lay-by on the A7 where Black had sexually assaulted her. Black's intention had been to quickly make a final scheduled delivery to Galashiels before further abusing and almost certainly killing his victim. At the police station, Black admitted to sexually assaulting the girl, saying he had not done more to her because he didn't have much time. A search of Black's van found restraining devices including assorted ropes, sticking plaster, and hoods, a Polaroid camera, numerous articles of girls' clothing, a mattress, and a selection of sexual aids. Sorry, that was my dog. Black claimed that on his long-distance deliveries, he would pull into a lay-by and dress in the children's clothing before masturbating. He gave no plausible explanation for the sexual aids. Black's Stanford Hill lodgings were searched at the request of Scottish detectives, yielding a large collection of child pornography in magazine, book, photographic, and video format, including 58 videos and films depicting child sexual abuse, which Black later claimed to have bought in continental Europe. Also found were several items of children's clothing, a semen-stained copy of a Nottingham newspaper detailing the 1988 attempted abduction of Teresa Thornhill, and a variety of sex aids. On August 10, 1990, Black was convicted of the abduction and sexual assault of the unnamed schoolgirl. The Edinburgh High Court sentenced Black to life imprisonment based on the evidence in this case. 4 years later, a new trial convicted Black of the murders of Susan, Carolyn, and Sarah. Over a decade later, in 2011, Black was found guilty of the murder of Jennifer Carty, but he would only live about 4 more years. On January 12, 2016, Black died at age 68 of a heart attack. But that is not the end of his story. Black has been linked to 13 further child murders and disappearances across the UK, Ireland, and continental Europe, committed between 1969 and 1987. The following are the other suspected murders that Black is involved in. In the UK, on April 8, 1969, April Fabb, who was age 13, was last seen cycling from Menton, Norfolk, towards her sister's home in Roughton, Norfolk. Her bicycle was found in a field on the route she had taken, but her body was never found. May 21, 1973, Christine Markham, aged 9, a Scunthorpe schoolgirl, last seen walking to school. Her body was never found. Black was questioned about the potential involvement in her abduction in 2004. August 19, 1978, Jeanette Tate, age 13. She was abducted while delivering newspapers in Ellesmere, Devon. Her bicycle was found in a country lane by 2 girls she had spoken 2 minutes before, but her body has never been found. Black made numerous deliveries of posters to the southwest of England in 1978. At the time of Black's death, the Devon and Cornwall police were due to submit a fresh file to the Crown Prosecution Service seeking formal abduction and murder charges in relation to this case. On July 28, 1979, 14-year-old Suzanne Lawrence was last seen leaving her sister's home in Harold Hill, northeast London. Although her body has never been found, Lawrence's name was added to a list of Black's possible victims in July 1994. June 16, 1980, 14-year-old Patricia Morse disappeared from the grounds of her comprehensive school. Her fully clothed body was found in Hounslow Heath 2 days after her disappearance. She had been strangled with a ligature. November 4, 1981, 16-year-old Pamela Hasty. Her bludgeoned and strangled body was found in Johnstone, Renfrewshire in November 1981. One witness was adamant that he had seen a man matching Black's description running from the crime scene, but police do not believe Black was near Renfrewshire at the time of Hasty's murder. This is in Ireland. March 18, 1977, Mary Boyle, age 6, a Kincasslaw schoolgirl who disappeared while visiting her grandparents in Ballyshannon. Black is known to have been in County Donegal at the time of her disappearance. Her body has never been found. And then in Germany, June 20th, 1985, Silke Garvin, age 10. Garvin was a Detmold schoolgirl who disappeared on her way to a dental appointment. Her body was found in a stream the day after her disappearance. She had been sexually assaulted and strangled. Black is known to have made a delivery of posters to a British Army base close to Garvin's home on the date of her disappearance. In the Netherlands, on August 5, 1986, Cheryl Moran disappeared as she walked to her friend's home in the Dutch city of IJmuiden. Her body has never been found. Black made regular trips to nearby Amsterdam to buy child pornography. In France, May 5, 1987, Virginie Delmas, age 10, was abducted from Neuilly-sur-Marne on May 5, 1987. Her nude body was found in a Paris orchid on October 9th. Delmas had been strangled. The extent of decomposition prevented the pathologist determining whether she had been raped before death. Black made several deliveries in and around Paris on the date of Delma's disappearance. May 30th, 1987, 10-year-old Hema Gridhari was discovered in the Paris suburb of Malakoff 2 hours after she was last seen alive. She had been raped and strangled. Black is known to have regularly traveled upon the road where Gridhari's body was found when making deliveries in northern France. June 3, 1987, 7-year-old Perrine Vigneron. Vigneron disappeared on her way to buy a Mother's Day card in Boulers en route to attending a pottery course. Her strangled body was discovered in a rapeseed field in Chelsea on June 27th. A white van had been seen in Bellures on the day of Vigneron's disappearance. June 27th, 1987, 9-year-old Sabine Dumont. She was a Paris schoolgirl and last seen alive in Bievres on June 27th. Her strangled and sexually assaulted body was found the following day in the commune of Valhalla. Black was named as a prime suspect in Dumont's murder in 2011. Robert Black never admitted culpability in any of the murders of which he was convicted or suspected and refused to cooperate with investigators, in spite of having little hope of ever being freed. According to Ray Wire, a pioneer in the treatment of sex offenders who conducted several interviews with Black between 1990 and 1993, the prime reason for this was an issue of control for Black. Wire summarized the psychology behind Black's refusal to cooperate with investigators as this. He's the sort of person for whom it's all about power and control. Having information about what he's done gives him power. He has no desire to ease his conscience, and he's not going to give up the one thing that gives him power over the pain that his victims' families are suffering. The closest Black ever came to confessing to any of his crimes was in response to a single question put to him shortly before his 1994 murder trial by Wire, in which he was asked why he had never denied any of the charges brought against him. According to Wire, Black had replied to this question with the words, "Because I couldn't." That is the end of part 3 of episode 5. I will put out one more, so a part 4, and then that'll end episode 5. there's so many horrible child murderer killers that it would just be a continuing series. So I'll just do them randomly. So anyway, that's all. Have a good evening.